Welcome to the Trellix Spotlight series. My name is Nick, and I will be your host. Today's session will focus on how to optimize your Trellix environment using diagnostics and reporting with Health Watch. This webinar will be recorded. If you prefer not to participate in the recorded session, please feel free to disconnect at this time. A link to today's recorded presentation will be emailed to all registered attendees. This webinar is a brief overview covering common use cases and scenarios regarding this topic. It is not intended to be all-encompassing. If assistance is needed, please contact Trellix Technical Support. If you have questions during the webinar, please type them in the Q&A window. This webinar may run longer or shorter based on your participation, and we recommend asking as many questions as you can to make the most of this series. If the Q&A window is not displayed, click the tab at the bottom of your session window and click on the Q&A icon. We will answer the questions during the final section of this webinar. If you experience any audio issues during the webcast, please drop and attempt to reconnect. Our presenters today are Zach Krider and Meikle. Zach has over 10 years of experience working for Trellix. He has managed and supported some of the most complex projects for Trellix, spanning multiple customer verticals across the globe. Mike serves as an enterprise architect within the Global Strategic Services team. Via the Health Watch Service, he has acted as a trusted advisor for more than 800 Trellix customers. Mike has over 20 years of information technology experience, 14 of which has been focused on information security and risk management. He has helped secure companies and institutions across government, healthcare, education, manufacturing, and finance. Ladies and gentlemen, Zach and Mike.
Thanks, Nick, for the introduction. So I'm Zachary Krider. I'm the Senior Manager of our Global Strategic Services group within Professional Services. So we help customers of all shapes and sizes across all different geos, whether North America, Europe, Asia Pacific, Japan, or Latin America. And so we help customers build out their strategy. And one of the things we'll be talking to you today is around our Health Watch service that we developed to really help you get the most value out of your Trellix solutions.
And I'm Meikle. I'm a Senior Enterprise Architect here with Trellix, and I work with Zach with the Global Strategic Services team.
So today, just a quick agenda. So we'll be covering, what are some common cause and effect of misconfigurations that we see when we're working with customers. Some overall trends and findings that we see with customers just in their normal management of their security solutions, and also some findings that we see with Health Watch when we run this with customers. We'll touch on what are the outcomes that you get during a Health Watch engagement, how Health Watch works in your environments, what we deliver during a Health Watch engagement, and then we'll also show a short demo of the Health Watch portal, and then we'll open up to Q&A.
So let me go ahead and talk about some of the leading causes of misconfigurations that we see globally. So human error is kind of the top one with 64%. Another is, of course, lack of team awareness of just general security policies and procedures. Another is lack of adequate controls and then just oversight. And then kind of at 47%, we're looking at just too many consoles, too many APIs, just to be able to manage these adequately. Let's go to the next slide. So when we look at these kind of oversights and these issues, we can look at some of these incidents that are caused by misconfiguration. So 27% lead to critical data breaches. Another is unauthorized access to a database. Of course, with accounts that have too high privileges or unauthorized logins in general. And then finally, these cause system downtime.
And so Mike covered at a very high level, right? Some common misconfigurations we see, within customer environments that lead to breaches or incidents, just because they're having to manage too many security tools, lack of process procedures in their environment. And so we're going to go over what are some common trends and findings that we see when we're working with the customers, having kind of those misconfigurations down in your mind that we just touched on. So in general, right, Health Watch, there's some challenges that it does help you address with this type of engagement. So, we see a lot of times customers, you just don't have the time or lacking the skill set to manage, the breadth of security solutions in your environment, right? So you may have to be managing, your endpoint technology, your network technology, VPN tokens, things of that nature, right? So your time is very spread across a given week. So there's only much time you can dedicate to the solutions. Great thing about Health Watch is we can bubble up, what key areas to look for within your Trellix portfolio that you have deployed to really help guide you and make the most of your time. We also understand, right, with all this going on with multiple projects you probably have to do or audits, right? There's not a lot of time that you can dedicate to tuning the products or diving deep into the configurations of the solutions that are deployed, right? And so a lot of times the solutions get into a set and forget it mode, where someone may have set the policy for your endpoint security solution 5 years ago, and no one's actually gone back in and reviewed your exclusions. How are the features enabled, what's disabled? No one's really done a full audit of that, right? This opens up to misconfigurations where you could have key features turned off or disabled that could lead to an incident in your environment. We also understand too, there is, the great resignation going on, right? So it's very hard to find enough talent to really help handle all these projects, these multiple solutions that you have, right? When you have staff turnover, typically people might leave, right? They leave no documentation of how things were configured, why was a policy set up the way it was, why were these particular exclusions entered in the tool. Usually none of that's documented. They leave and you lose all that tribal knowledge. So a lot of times we see customers really struggle with that, where someone left, they didn't document why a policy was configured, and just out of fear of breaking the environment, they just don't want to go touch a policy, so they just leave it be, even though it could have bad configurations or bad exclusions in it. And then lastly, everyone gets tied up with different projects or audits that go on that really consume your time. So we see a lot of customers spend 30 to even almost 50% of their time having to deal with audits in their environment. So having to deal with auditors to show you have certain configurations deployed, your policies are in line to the regulations for your industry or your particular country. Now, when working with these customers, there's some industry trends that we typically see, right? On the Trellix side of things, we see customers that have multiple EPO servers in their environment, which really, stresses out the team of having to manage multiple different consoles, extracting data from one system, importing to another. So a lot of customers are trying to consolidate their EPO environments, and in some cases, consolidate their on-prem EPO environment to start the whole migration path to move to a SaaS offering with our Envision EPO platform. In a lot of cases too, customers where they built out, physical servers to manage their environment, they're oversized, overspec'd, right? It eats into the cost of actually managing the solution. In some cases, it could be undersized, right, where you're facing performance issues with your EPO or your network security manager in your environment. We also see customers, really strive to standardize their baseline in their environment, so get a consistent set of product versions deployed to their endpoints and product mix, to where it makes it easier on the team to do upgrades, patching, and tracking for audits. And this also goes in the defining product combinations. So we see a lot of times customers may deploy 2 products to a subset of workstations. Another subset of workstations may have 10 different products deployed, right? Which that really makes it hard on the team to manage those policies and updates. And then also too, customers have a large breadth of policies having to manage, which really makes it hard on your operations team to make sure if you make a change, you have to make it in 100 different other policies, or can you simplify your policies where you only make the change in 1 or 2 areas? We also see a lot of customers trying to move to cloud or to a SaaS offering, whether that may be moving an on-prem physical EPO server to a public cloud like AWS, for instance, or moving to Envision EPO to reduce the overall complexity of their environment and reduce a lot of the maintenance load. So that is kind of a big trend we see a lot of customers undertaking these days. And then the last one, everyone's really striving for this, is around automation of day-to-day activities. So utilizing built-in functionality in EPO to really drive automation and really have the product work to keep itself up to date and protected, so you don't have to do a lot of manual intervention in the solution. So things like server tasks, automatic responses, taking advantage of a robust API in our solutions to really drive this automation. Now, when we're running Health Watch with customers, there are some common findings that we do run across. We do see, a lot of times, kind of going back to the policy example and the misconfiguration example that Mike touched on around processes, you could have key features disabled within your policies that no one was aware of. So think of our global threat intelligence being disabled in ENS, right, which provides broad coverage beyond just your standard AIM core detection capabilities, or other key things like, ENS isn't connected to your TIE infrastructure. You have exploit prevention or on access disabled in the environment, which can really provide great protections for you to prevent a lot of the malware that's out there. We also see a lot of customers struggle just around compliance, and Mike touched on this as well in his previous slide. customers really struggle of identifying which systems are managed by Trellix today, which systems are not managed by Trellix currently, and trying to tackle those to get them under management in the EPO console. But we also see just basic IT hygiene, right? Where systems have been rebooted in over 90 or 100 days, and why this is beyond just the Trellix products. This does have an effect on your performance and just security posture in general. So if you roll out patches, the patches most of the time will just set in memory, right, which will eat up the available memory on a system if they haven't rebooted, but also too, that means those systems haven't been patched for known vulnerabilities. So think of WannaCry, for example. Just other key areas around compliance, devices that stop communicating, just keeping a pulse on that. If you have a large subset of devices that stop talking to EPO, that's a kind of a red flag you want to go investigate to understand, is there a certain network segment that just got stood up that something could be blocked on the firewall, or there's certain things on the network that are blocking communication back in to the EPO server itself. Then also just around tuning events, we understand and hear it all the time from different SOCs. They're just being drowned in just the number of events that come from the endpoint products. And when we do these engagements with customers, typically we are able to uncover that there's a subset of systems that are generating the most noise in the environment, and usually that's a misconfiguration either in the policy that's been assigned or the role that's been created on that particular system, or in other cases it could just be a misconfigured application that's actually installed on that system that's generating all the noise because it hasn't been patched, or there could be other vulnerabilities with it that are triggering all these alerts. And then network traffic not actively being scanned. This is really more on the network IPS side. We see a lot of times where customers don't have sensors on certain network segments to really scan the traffic for any malicious activity. And then misconfigurations, Mike touched on this at the opening. This is probably the biggest one we run across, where a customer could be facing a malware in their environment or face a breach, and Health Watch is able to bubble up and do an investigation, and able to bubble up that they had so many exclusions in their ENS policy that the product was really spending more time trying to figure out what not to scan than what to scan. And so once you get a large number of exclusions in your ENS policies out there, it can actually have a negative impact on your environment from a performance standpoint, as well as increasing your risk footprint on the devices. So, things we see that are most common are, the full temp folder excluded, user profiles, C drive, the system folder, things of that nature being fully excluded from ENS scanning, which those are very common attack vectors from a lot of the malware that's out there that we see. Additionally, too, we understand, a lot of times customers face performance issues with, deploying solutions out there. And when we run Health Watch, we actually find there's environment variables that are leading to those performance problems. So a lot of times we'll identify, there's a large subset of devices that have less than 4 gigs of RAM, or less than 4 CPU, or less than 10 gigs free on the C drive. And those are contributing factors to the performance impact that your users are facing. Then also too, we see misconfigured roles, right? So we see a lot of times people will write a data loss prevention role to monitor everything, right? Which just drowns the SOC in events, fills up the EPO database, decreases performance to manage the environment, and someone may not even realize that role's out there or that misconfiguration was put in place. And then lastly, we see a lot of customers still running end-of-life software, which we want you to be on the latest and greatest to get the most value out of your investment with Trellix and to make sure you're secure. But we also understand, these environments are very large that you have to deal with and many different solutions. So Health Watch is a great opportunity to bubble those up to your attention where you may have end-of-life software. So what are some business values that you get during a Health Watch engagement? One of the things, key areas is around operations. We want to make sure you're able to efficiently utilize the Trellix solutions, right? So are your systems running effectively, right? Do you have the right product mix deployed in your environment? Do you have the right features turned on? Are there any misconfigurations in your policy that are exposing you from a risk standpoint? And so those are some key things that we're able to bubble up in a Health Watch engagement. If you are planning to do an upgrade of your EPO server, or let's say upgrade ENS from one version to the next, or what's coming up in the future of ENS to Unified Agent, you want to make sure you have, all your I's dotted and your T's crossed to be able to do that upgrade. Health Watch is a great service to identify what product versions you have in your environment, be able to walk you through what that upgrade plan looks like to get you on the stable version to make your upgrade successful. We also want to make sure, you're reducing your costs as much as possible to actually utilize the Trellix solutions. So, is your environment oversized? Are you taking advantage of all the features that you've actually purchased with Trellix? Are there features turned off that you weren't aware of that could provide additional protection for your environment? Those are things we can bubble up as well, and that'll kind of help you reduce some of the operational costs of having to manage the Trellix products in your environment and make sure you're getting the most return on your investment for the products and features you purchased. And that kind of flows into the leveraging investments. Like I said, a lot of times we see customers have key features turned off within ENS they may not be aware of that could, help prevent ransomware or limit the attack surface from a ransomware attack, right? And a lot of times those features are disabled. The customer may not be aware that those exist in the product, but HealthWatch, with our subject matter experts, we're able to walk you through, identify those areas, and explain what those features are and how to enable them and the impact they would have in your environment from, a risk standpoint, but even from an operational standpoint. We touched on too, a lot of times with turnover, there's a loss of tribal knowledge in the environment. HealthWatch is a great way to document your current configuration, right? That way you have a snapshot in time of how your policy and environment is configured. That way, if you have to bring on new people to your team or hand off the solution to someone else, right? It's documented in HealthWatch, kind of at an audit trail standpoint. And then resources, just having time, FaceTime with subject matter experts, leveraging them when we do this Health Watch service with you, right? It's a great opportunity to get that FaceTime, ask the questions of how does this impact you? What information would you get out of having this feature turned on? What protection capabilities, things of that nature, to make sure you're getting the most return on your investment. And now we'll talk about some customer outcomes, and Mike will walk you through the outcomes of the Health Watch engagement.
Sure, sounds great. So, globally, looking at definitely the successes that we've had, some of the positive outcomes is, of course, reducing your risk and threat risks, right? That's one of our goals, is to make sure that when we see, of course, the global threat landscape is always changing, always increasing, using our service, the Health Watch service, to kind of reduce that risk. And then how we do that is deliver a step-by-step plan to you to how to, appropriately configure your environment, use automation, and correct any outstanding issues based on our global best practices. And that's one way we assist when it comes to reducing those risks. Another, of course, is kind of optimizing your operations and your resources in general. Right. When we see the increased complexity of your environment and in general globally of the security environment, and then we have the lack of resources that Zach kind of touched on, we're here to help you ensure that our systems, so Trellix systems, are running optimally, right? That the right resources are being applied in the right direction, and that you can once again leverage that automation that comes with our solutions, and that way kind of reducing that operational overhead. And of course, we want to make sure that you're leveraging our solutions effectively, right? Getting the most out of your investment in our products. So if you're using all your technological solutions and efficiently, we want to position it in a way that we are assisting you with tuning those products, right? Making sure that the configuration and the feature implementations are optimally set. And that way, of course, once again, return on investment, and also that assists you when it comes to trying to juggle where your resources are assigned. Let's go to the next slide. So the engagement process is quite simple, right? Usually just a 6-step process, usually, to get it through from actually engagement to completion of the engagement. So the service incorporates a lightweight application that's memory resident, doesn't require installation into EPO or installation on any endpoint. It's automated. It gathers data, and then of course, what it does is it uploads it to our HealthWatch portal if there's an internet connection. If not, it creates a encrypted zip file locally that can then be moved to an endpoint that does have access to the internet and then uploaded. We do have other types of Health Watch services, which we'll talk about further in the presentation, where if you only can have data on site, we can address that issue. Of course, once that data is uploaded, we do an analysis. You have subject matter experts doing that analysis on that data. That data is also displayed in the portal with a baseline. We start building out a plan, a 30, 60, 90-day action plan to address the sort of the deviation between the collected values versus our expected values when it comes to those global Trellix best practices. And of course, it has recommendations and reference links built within that plan, that custom plan, to help you fix any issues that we come across. And then you receive that consultative guidance. We do have a meeting where we review the data in the portal, in the report, the custom report that we've created for you, with a customized security scorecard. And of course, during that meeting, we answer your questions. We make sure you understand the data in the report and in the portal. And then hopefully that way we can kind of drive you to those cost reductions, optimization of your environment, and reducing your risk. So when we look at the solutions that we support, we do have EPO, which is kind of like our primary component of the Health Watch service. It encompasses quite a bit of analysis, everything from the EPO application server itself to SQL to managed systems, events, some high-level product and policy analysis. That includes a piece of ENS as well in there. We have ENS policy analysis as well as exclusion analysis, as Zach kind of touched on earlier in the presentation about looking at your exclusions. We also look at your network security platform, multiple platforms if you have them, everything from the actual manager to the sensors. Another part of our EPO Health Watch is going to be application control. We do policy and setting analysis, as well as a data loss prevention, DLP, policy and setting analysis, which is incorporated into our EPO Health Watch. So when I mentioned before about kind of the different flavors of Health Watch, we understand that some customers have sensitive data that cannot leave their premises, that can't go offsite to our data center. So we have something called the Federal Health Watch tool, which is a way to do an on-site analysis of EPO. It does provide a certain level of analysis where you download the executable from our portal, you get a token from us from the portal, and then you can execute it locally. The data never leaves your site. We do have several approaches of analyzing the data, either a hybrid approach where you send data securely to us and then we delete it, or we can do it on site. Then we prepare a report for EPO. And then, of course, the enterprise version is what we've been talking about with the online portion of the portal, where we upload the data to our Health Watch portal, and then we do our analysis with our analytics engine, and then, of course, look at the values that we collect versus our global expected values. And looking at this table, you can sort of see the differentiation of how both services operate. The enterprise version of Health Watch has more robust policy and exclusion analysis, of course, just due to the limitations of being on site. But like I said, we do have several options for those corporations and entities that require either just purely on site or can allow data to be sent to our Health Watch portal.
Okay, so now we'll touch on how does this work? How does the data collection work within your environment? So the primary one, like Mike touched on, and the most common one that we run across is around EPO. So the way we've developed the Health Watch service offering, right, is we do provide you a standalone executable that you would run in your environment. The nice thing about this is it doesn't require to be installed on anything in your environment. You don't have to be on any specific version of EPO. So whether you're running the latest and greatest or you're 2-3 versions behind, our Health Watch service will support that. So like I said, you can run this from a laptop, you can run it from the server itself, as long as the actual executable itself that we provide you has direct access to the EPO database, so the SQL server. And then if you're wanting to analyze the hardware configuration of your environment, it will make a WMI call out to your actual infrastructure servers. So think of the EPO server itself, agent handlers, endpoint security for storage, move servers. It will reach out to them to collect that information. Now, when the tool runs, it does try to make an internet call back to the Health Watch portal system. But if this is executed in an air-gapped environment, the tool will detect that and save all the results to an encrypted file locally in your machine that then you can manually upload to the Health Watch portal. If the machine where you execute the tool from has internet access, the tool itself will actually upload the data automatically directly to the Health Watch portal to your engagement to be analyzed by our team. Also, if you're looking to do a Health Watch on your network security platform, Essentially, similar approach to EPO. Nothing's required to be installed on your network security manager. It's a standalone executable that can be ran from a laptop or a server, as long as it has API connectivity to your network security manager. The tool is able to run, collect all the data, similar to EPO. If it's an air-gapped environment, it'll save the results to a local encrypted file that then you can manually upload to the Health Watch portal. If there is internet connectivity where the Health Watch tool is ran, it'll automatically upload the results from your network security manager directly up to the Health Watch portal to be analyzed. Now, Mike's going to cover kind of what we deliver and kind of what you get out of a Health Watch engagement.
Certainly. So, like we were talking about with, so this is specifically when it comes to the enterprise version of the Health Watch service. So that data gets uploaded to our portal, and then from there, what you do see here on this particular slide is sort of the output. So we do have kind of a series of data checkpoints where we look at, especially when it comes to EPO and NSP, we'll display these findings, and when there's deviations from, say, the collected value within your environment versus the expected value based on our global recommendations, these are identified with the red dot of having a particular issue that you can take. What we'll do is when we sit down and review this with you, we'll have a discussion, look at the recommendation, see how that fits in your environment. Also, looking at the slide, you can see we have a discover date, right? When we do track findings across multiple health watches to make sure that you do have like at least an inception date when we first saw this particular setting in your environment. We break it out by classification, so compliance, operations, and performance as defined by Trellix. But you may have slightly different definitions, but it gives us a baseline. And then we look at it, of course, across that criticality, risk, complexity, and effort. From there, each one of those findings will have a recommendation and reference URL, as you can see on the kind of that middle portion of the slide. It'll just have a discussion point and then the reference links. And then also within the Health Watch portal, we're going to have an overall dashboard of the actual findings. Now, if you have multiple EPOs, it'll have an aggregate score, or multiple NSPs, aggregate score. You'll have critical findings by section, of course, findings by classification. That way you can kind of break the data down in multiple different ways. And then, like we mentioned earlier in the presentation, there's going to be that custom plan that we build out for you. Piece of that plan is going to be that 30, 60, and 90-day action plan, broken out by those categories I mentioned, right? Performance, compliance, and operations. And then also based on those criticality, risk, complexity, and effort. That action plan, that 30, 60, 90, will be in the beginning of the kind of the executive summary of the report, and then we'll break it out into detailed findings, right? With those, each section, sort of, if we're using EPO, for example, we'll have EPO itself, or the managed systems and SQL, all have their own categories with their detailed recommendations and references for remediation.
Now we'll go through a very short demo of the Health Watch portal itself, so you can really understand what do you get with enterprise version of a Health Watch, and kind of what are the different data points that you'd be able to see. So what we'll show here is a demo of from the Health Watch portal itself. So you'll get the standard login for an engagement. You'll be able to see your environment, the different items that have been scored, the overall score for your environment. If you had multiple EPO servers that were analyzed, it would give you the overall score of all 4, for example, the average score across the board. Then when we get in the Health Watch portal itself, there'll be 2 areas. So the all checks, this will be just kind of the raw data snapshot that we gathered from your environment. But then on the findings tab, like Mike touched on, this is where all the information is going to be of what we found in your environment that could be outside of our best practices that we've identified. And it's really more of a conversation with you to go through these particular findings. Do you have a business justification as to why this is outside of Trellix best practice? And we could actually override that finding if we needed to. Additionally, we'll do a full analysis of how SQL is configured. This is really typically a big kind of bottleneck around performance for most customers. So this is really nice to really help you understand, are there misconfigurations on SQL to get better performance out of your EPO console. Additionally, too, we'll go through kind of the managed systems in your environment, kind of give you a snapshot of some high-level data points that we like to look at for most customers around the overall health, but we'll also do checks as well against that to help you understand, are there any things that you can fix for your endpoint deployment today to get your devices into a better security posture. We'll also do kind of a quick snapshot of the overall events in your environment. This is another typical bottleneck around just the a growing size of your EPO database. So this is very good awareness to bring up with most customers around what events are filling up your database. Is there any tuning you could do to reduce the events? We'll also dive into a very high level around the threats that have been detected in your environment by the various products that you have deployed, right? So what are the most common events that you're seeing? What are the most common features being used in the products? But another cool feature we've launched recently is this tuning area. So we can tell you, are there certain rules or events that are taking up the majority of your database or generating the most noise for your SOC to go in and tune those, reduce the false positives, and get the most out of your investment with the Trellix portfolio. We'll also go through and analyze the product configurations that you have for the various solutions you have deployed in your environment. Is there anything out of best practice that you need to be aware of? We also do analysis around the product baselines, and what we talk about product baselines is really helping you understand what is the product mix in your environment, both from a version and product standpoint, both from your workstation and the server, to really help you, get a consistent baseline to make it easier to manage. We'll also help you understand what are all product versions you have deployed in your environments, the number of versions that you have for each solution. Is there anything end of life, not supported anymore that needs to be brought to your attention? We'll help you with that. A new area we've added recently is around data loss prevention. So like Mike touched on, we'll do a full snapshot of your DLP configuration in your environment, but also do a very deep analysis within your DLP policies. Is there anything that can be changed within your classifications or your definitions to get more out of your DLP deployment and really tune that? And we'll give you findings as well of how your DLP is configured against Trellix best practices. Is there anything you need to tweak or tune to get more out of your DLP investment with Trellix and get better performance and detection capabilities? We'll also do a full analysis of your policies. So for endpoint security, for example, we'll be able to tell you, how many policies do you have in each area? Is there opportunity to reduce policies? So in this case, there's 100 on access. How could you reduce that down to maybe 20? Right, but we'll also go through and do a full analysis of all the exclusions that you have. What are standard common exclusions across the board in your environment? What are common low risk exclusions? And also provide the ability to export these exclusions to a CSV to analyze with your SOC team. But we'll also tell you what are non-recommended exclusions or common attack vectors that may be excluded in your policies. So things like the temp folder, things of that nature, we'll be able to bring to your attention. We also have the full analysis of app control. So if you have application control deployed in your environment, we'll give you a high-level snapshot of how it's configured, but also dive deep in the policies to see if there's any items that could be tweaked or tuned to get better performance out of your application deployment within your environment. We'll also do a hardware analysis if you opt in to do a WMI collection, so we can tell you, is your SQL sized right, undersized? Same thing for EPO and VirusScan for storage. So at a high level, that's a very kind of quick demo of the actual Health Watch portal itself. So now we'll touch at a high level, just some use cases of some Health Watch engagements that we've done, and just kind of some common feedback that we get from most customers when we do the Health Watch engagements, or kind of what they typically need. So we do feel your pain, right? So a lot of times customers, they do come to us before we kick off a Health Watch engagement. They want to know, how can we help reduce the operational costs? Whether it's from too many servers, EPO servers in the environment, the servers are too large, it's just being hard to manage, the costs are just getting out of control. How can they consolidate those or get more optimal configuration? How many versions of the software are you running in the environment? So do you have one version of ENS running, or do you have 30 different versions of ENS running in your environment? How can you consolidate that down to a manageable number? Or do you even have end-of-life software running in your environment, or software you weren't even aware of? So someone deleted an extension from EPO and you lost the reporting capability to even understand that you had a specific version of HIPS deployed in your environment that you weren't aware of that was still on a few systems. Also, to kind of just doing a snapshot in time of, you may be new to the company, right, in their configuration, but they could have had an EPO or Health Watch ran, 2-3 months back with a prior administrator. So it gave kind of a snapshot in time of how things were configured, how things were documented. So it's a great tool to use to really, skill up new people that you're bringing on your team of how things are configured. Or even if you're working with an auditor, just point them to the Health Watch portal and they can extract all the data they need there. So you don't have to spend a lot of time manually manipulating data out of the Health Watch portal. And also, too, are your systems taking advantage of all the features and functionality and the Trellix solutions you have deployed? So do you have the key features such as global threat intelligence turned on? Is it at the right severity level? Is exploit prevention enabled? Do you have memory protection enabled? Do you have credential theft enabled in ENS to help guard against ransomware attacks? Those are key items that we can bubble up to your attention to make sure you're taking advantage of those, but also to make sure you're taking advantage or getting the best security posture out of the solutions you have deployed. And also too, just making sure, you've purchased, maybe several Trellix solutions. Are you taking advantage of all those Trellix solutions in your environment, or do you only have parts or pieces of those deployed? We can help you understand what you've purchased, right? Is it actually deployed in your environment fully based on your investment in Trellix? And how would those new modules or features affect your environment? Will it generate more events? How can you tune that? And how can you take advantage of those when you enable them in your environment? And then, the most common one that we always get is your environment running efficiently and effectively, right? So you want to understand, do you have systems that could have a misconfiguration that's leading to a performance issue? So they have low resources, things like low RAM, low memory that could be contributing to, user complaints around performance with a Trellix solution. But in reality, it could be an environmental factor that's causing the performance pain for end users. So those are the key items we can bubble up, arm you with that information so you can go back to those teams or end users and really have, a meaningful conversation, let them know that it could be underlying environmental factors that are leading to their performance problems, and the best way to approach that and remediate it so that they're no longer facing performance issues. Just kind of a use case touching on this particular customer. This is a very large customer that had heavily invested within Trellix, like a very large environment, over 200,000 nodes, where they had ENS deployed. Right, they had multiple servers across different geos, right, which was just a huge cost for them to have to manage and maintain, right, because these were all physical servers, right. So initially we started all this off with Health Watch to fully analyze their entire environment, and then it kickstarted the conversation with the customer of, what are the steps they can take to consolidate their EPO environments to, a single or, a couple EPO servers. But then also to not only just consolidating to EPO servers, but how could you move to virtualize those systems, either on-prem virtualization, moving to a public cloud type offering such as AWS, or even moving to the Envision platform. Customer in this case decided to keep everything on-prem and move to a virtual environment, but Health Watch was key there and helped them understand what are all the different versions across their environment, what's the consolidation plan look like, what's the process to do all that consolidation, and how to kind of track that. It also helped them to streamline their operations because they had multiple versions of endpoint security in their environment, multiple McAfee agents. So it's really put a huge burden on their operational team when they try to roll out patches or hot fixes, because they had to combat all the different versions, getting things up to date. Upgrade cycles were different for different systems, different business units, right? Which was huge inefficiency for the team. So Health Watch was able to identify where the most common baselines in their environment, where the most common product versions, help them get up to the most common product version in their environment. And that helped them kind of going forward to really effectively operate their environment and do upgrades, and reduced a lot of burden that was being placed on the operational team of having to chase down multiple different versions, how to handle the upgrade for the different versions that were out there. We also were able to identify, a lot of the, products that were deployed in their environment, or from a system standpoint. It was actually doing a lot of detections were coming from unpatched software. So, the customer hadn't rolled out a lot of key patches for Microsoft Office, for example, which led to a lot of exploit prevention events being generated in the EPO console, which they were legit events, but it was kind of drowning out from a SOC standpoint of being able to focus on key indicators of compromise that exploit prevention was able to block, because of all these Office alerts are being triggered by exploit prevention. And then also too, this customer had, a lot of challenges with staff turnover. People would leave, lose all the tribal knowledge. Things weren't very well documented. So nice thing about Health Watch in this instance is we're able to do a snapshot in time to help them understand how things were configured. So when they brought in new team members, they could start in Health Watch to understand how things are configured today and slowly get up to speed of how to move into production. And also to help them reduce time of having to deal with auditors, because instead of having to export XML files, manipulate those, export CSVs and things of that nature, they were able to point the auditors to the Health Watch portal, and that really reduced a lot of time that they had to focus on these kind of side projects or with auditors. Additionally, we see, a lot of customers see a lot of value in Health Watch, and we see a lot of customers return. So most customers they'll run a health watch engagement and they'll come back, anywhere between 3 to 6 months wanting to do another health watch engagement. And the reason for that is, they want to see, are they progressing their overall security posture in their environment? Are there new things bubbling up that they need to be aware of and focus their attention on? But they really want to get the most value out of their solution, right? And so a lot of customers just kind of get tired of playing, whack-a-mole, trying to chase around, different issues. Where should they focus their time? The nice thing about Health Watch, and like Mike covered in the previous slides, is we do provide that kind of 30, 60, 90-day action plan. So really kind of guide you of where you should focus your time. And that way you get the most out of, focusing on those key areas to get a better security posture or reduce the operational burden on your team. But, we see a lot of customers, Health Watch can help them in multiple different ways, whether it is identifying, systems that didn't meet, the minimum specifications for Microsoft Office that were causing performance issues. It helped them identify the root cause of why end users were having slow systems, which it turned out to be, systems that had not been refreshed in quite some time, had low memory, low CPU. They had a large number of servers that hadn't been rebooted in 180 days. So they had a lot of patches set in memory that were just, causing the performance issue, and it wasn't necessarily related to the product, but those were key things that were able to bubble up to the security team so they can go back and have that meaningful conversation with the different business units. And, like I said, a lot of customers really like Health Watch because it helps them guide them as to where they should focus their time, what they should fix based on criticality and the most, risk to their environment. It's very guided in that manner from a 30, 60, 90-day action plan. So that we'll hand it over to Nick for Q&A. But before we hand it over to Nick, if you have any questions in Q&A, please bring those up. But also too, if you want more information on how you can get a Health Watch engagement going or service going within your environment, please reach out to your account rep and they'll be able to get you in contact with the Health Watch team to get your engagement scheduled. So over to you, Nick, for Q&A.
Thanks, Zach and Mike. As a reminder for everyone, Trellix Education Services offers exceptional training to go along with our award-winning products. If you would like to learn more, please visit the website listed on the screen to see all of our offerings. Now let's get our Q&A session started. I see we have several questions, but it's not too late to add your question. Please type it in the Q&A window to submit. Additionally, take a moment to fill out the survey. Your feedback and suggestions are always appreciated.
What is the average time frame or time commitment the customer needs for an engagement?
Yeah, Nick. So typically, we see customers, the total time for engagements usually around 2 hours, right? So usually up front, there's about 30 minutes to sometimes an hour to collect the data from a customer's environment. Once the data is collected and uploaded back to the Health Watch system, then our subject matter experts will go through, analyze the data, then schedule a readout with the customer. Typically, in that readout session, it's probably about an hour time frame, so total about 2 hour time commitment from a customer.
Got it. Okay, perfect. Thank you for that. How many products or EPO servers worth of data can be collected during an engagement?
Yeah, so the typical engagement, so we can collect from one EPO instance, or we have customers where they have multiple EPO servers or NSM appliances in their environment. So the tool can connect to up to 25 different instances at one time. So, if you had 25 EPO servers and then another 25 network security managers, the tool can connect up to all 25 during a single engagement and collect that data. If you have an environment that is kind of air-gapped or separated, you can run the tool in the separate environment to collect the data from the multiple EPO instances and so upload those up to the Health Watch portal to be analyzed. And, if you have more than 25 EPO servers or network security managers, that's okay. You just run the tool to collect those, and the portal accepts. We've had customers where they've had close to 100 different systems that we've collected from. So there's really no limit to the number of environments we can collect from during a typical engagement.
Got it. Okay, cool. Thank you for that. Can you overwrite findings if you have a business justification?
Yeah, of course, right? So we know our best practices aren't going to meet every needs of every environment, right? So you may have certain things that get flagged that, Trellix is identified as best practice, but you may have a business justification or a business reason as to why a particular item got flagged, right? So working with you during the readout, we can modify the score or modify findings based on that feedback. And the other nice thing too about the Health Watch service is once you get the results and you can see them directly in the Health Watch portal, you can actually add findings or comments directly to by each finding, and someone from Trellix can actually respond to you. You know, if you have questions why something was flagged, or just want to let us know, hey, you know, we understand this is best practice of Trellix, but we have a particular business finding as to why this shouldn't be flagged. You know, we can override that. That'll help improve your score and remove that finding from being flagged in your environment for your engagement.
Got it. Okay, cool. Thank you for that. What if the customer can't share data with Trellix? How can they engage with the Health Watch?
Yeah, so we understand, you know, you may have certain restrictions within your particular industry or in a particular country where you can't share data back to a third party like Trellix, and we completely understand that. So we can actually work with you to, you saw in the presentation, what we call our federal or our on-site Health Watch engagement, where we will send someone on site to work with you to run an air-gapped solution that'll collect all the data, keeps it in your environment, and then the consultant or subject matter expert that's working with you will actually review the results with you directly on site, so no data actually comes back to the Trellix environment. So we do have options. We can work with you. If you just let us know those restrictions in your environment, we can work with you on that.
Got it. Okay, perfect. Thank you for that. What is the, I'm sorry, will other Trellix products be supported in the Health Watch system?
Yeah, so today, you know, we support EPOs, Network Security Manager, or Network IPS, ENS, or Endpoint Security, Application Control, and Data Loss Prevention. We do have plans to bring on the entire Trellix portfolio. So in 2023, you'll be seeing additional solutions onboarded in there. So, you know, things like our encryption products, both our on-prem and cloud SIEM solutions, HX, endpoint detection response. We'll be onboarding those solutions into the Health Watch ecosystem. So when you run engagement, you can actually get a full visibility and understanding of all your Trellix solutions that you purchased and deployed to make sure they're configured and aligned to Trellix best practices to make sure you're getting the most out of those solutions.
Got it. Okay, perfect. Thank you for that. If we're using DMZ servers as agent handlers, what are the exact requirements port-wise to let the Health Watch tool connect? Do you have any guidance on ports that we should open to allow the Health Watch service to work?
Yeah, so when you run a Health Watch, the Health Watch tool itself, it can be ran from a workstation or the EPO server itself. It just needs access directly to the SQL database to extract the information to analyze. So if you have kind of an air-gapped environment, where you can only run the tool from a system that's, in the DMZ, for example, right, you just need to have the ports open to allow connectivity to the back-end EPO database for the tool to connect to it, extract the data, and upload it back to the Health Watch system. If you do want to collect the hardware configuration of, your agent handlers, your EPO server, the SQL server, for example, then that does make the calls over WMI. So the standard WMI ports will need to be open to allow that collection of the data of how the environment is sized.
Got it. Okay, perfect. Thank you for that. How can a customer engage with the health check service to check on costs and schedule the session?
Yeah, so if you can work directly with your sales rep and also email health_watch@trellix.com, and we can work with you to get engagement scheduled. So there's many options out there for that, and we do have some scenarios where we do provide the service depending on the customer and the situation where we can provide the service kind of as a free type offering. But if you reach out, like I said, to health_watch@trellix.com, include your sales rep, we'll be able to work with you and help you understand the cost and the engagement type model. But if you reach out to that, someone will be in touch with you. Typically in 24 to 72 hours, someone will respond to you and be able to work with you on that.
Got it. Okay, perfect. Thank you for that. It looks like that's all the questions that we had for today's session. I want to thank everyone for joining today's webinar, and a big thank you to Zach and Mike. As a reminder, a link to today's recorded presentation will be emailed to all registered attendees. This concludes today's webinar. Stay safe, everyone.